one way to render the answer that Jesus gives to James and John's sophomoric desire for ranking in today's gospel is, as Eugene Peterson puts it, is as he transliterates it, rather, in his version of the Bible called The Message. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is how it reads. Jesus replies, "You have no idea what you're asking. Are you capable of being baptized in the baptism I'm about to be plunged into?" I love water images. I have a deep kind of spirituality around water. I go to water when I want to feel closer to God. So I love this image of being plunged. So how I read Jesus' question today is this: are you powerful enough to be plunged into the plunging of my own doing that I will be plunged into? It's a question for them and for us about whether they really know what's coming. Now, when I think of this story, I remember back to June of 2020. I was standing on the beach, South Beach actually, of Point Roberts, where I had moved. Point Roberts, this unusual exclave of the United States, this peninsula. Ask me afterwards and I will tell you about it. So there I was, standing on South Beach in Point Roberts. It was an early spring day with the warmth of the sun there glittering over the waters. And I looked across to the San Juan Islands and beyond. It was 2020 and I had come to the water. I had come to the water to ask what had become of me, what had become of the world. The 3 months of what felt like an unfathomably long pandemic isolation, necessary as they were for everyone's health, had bent even the strongest of spines. They bent mine, maybe they bent yours too. I think the epidemic of loneliness that plagues our society became all the worse, and the very fortunate ones that were able to continue working, those were the ones who may have experienced this, and working from home at that. But as we know, the less fortunate ones continued in warehouses, in buses, in stores, to keep it all going, and some paid for it with their very life. That was what March of 2020 was. We saw the good and the bad of everyone then. And then in June of 2020, when the governor's isolation orders had lifted, by then I had been changed. We all were. We all were. Do you remember that time? Do you remember that moment? We were on the edge of a new world. We knew we'd been plunged into something, even though we did not know what would be coming. So many deaths, so much long COVID. We didn't know then what was coming. We only had a hint of it. So standing there looking out, finally, after returning to my home village after months stuck in Renton, I was there on the shores. And I wondered what would happen to me. What would happen to my seminary studies? What would happen to my call to the priesthood? What would even happen to my long-term relationship? Yes, I wondered about all of these things. Had I fled back to this gorgeous place that I loved just to watch everything fall apart? Standing at the edge of the sea, this is what happened to me in that moment. Standing at the edge of the sea, at the edge of the water, became for me a lived metaphor for looking out with melancholy across the abyss of crisis. Yes, I'd come to the water because I'd already been plunged into a plunging that was somewhere between my own doing and someone else's. The choices available and choices I made in my life had brought me to the edge of the sadness of the unknown. So I had come home. I had come to the sea. I had come to the water. I had come to the water to ask, what has become of me? What would become of me? What would become of us, of it all? And in their own way, James and John in our gospel today are facing their own existential crisis. Yes, I would offer this. They too had come to the water. And so I think it is important to dwell on this request that they made to Jesus. Let each of us sit, they said. Let each of us sit, one on the right hand and one on the left in your glory. Behind their question, they're asking, what will become of all of us? And they're so like us now, aren't they? These hot-headed brothers. Jesus calls them sons of thunder. And in crisis, they're asking, which of us rivals will sit on the right, the dexterous, grabby side that gets stuff? And which one of us on the left, the aristocratic side that gets to have all the choices? They're trying to get ahead, so they're ready for what's coming. Remember, what we just heard right before this story is when Jesus predicts for the third time, that he will go up to Jerusalem to be humiliated and killed. He's told them plainly. And you see, Mark's gospel is all about power and authority. So in their ask, James and John are exercising kind of an interpretive power that comes from being able to frame the question. So they put this question before Jesus. It's kind of a test, but also an asking, because they want to be ranked. And not just ahead of Peter, as one scholar I read talked about this passage this week, but also between themselves, these rival brothers. Who's going to sit here and who's going to sit here? But Jesus doesn't take the bait, because Jesus never does. Instead, he has them face their own identity crisis squarely. Who do you think you are, desiring this plunging of mine? But have they forgotten? Jesus says that he is going to die. Do you really want a piece of this action? Jesus asks. Who do you think you are? Do you really want a slice of what I'm choosing? While the culture of Jesus' time was one of honor and shame, ours is a more juridical one, this culture of guilt and innocence. And yes, we want to do our ranking too, don't we? We want to rank among the good and the bad. We all want this, to know our place in the pecking order. And I think this happens even more when times are tough. In our best moments, though, we all want everyone to get ahead. And now in our common life, as a nation, as a people here, we have some ranking to do in this time of year, this every 4 years, don't we? Election day is coming. We have some ranking to do. And for many of us, let's be honest, this is kind of a hazy time of dread. That's not a partisan statement. The rhetoric has gotten more hateful. We know this. Some of us are anxious, we're fearful. And like James and John, we're zealous about it all for those we support or those we don't. This week, though, Bishop Phil echoed what Father Stephen has already reminded us to do, to take part in this process, to vote. This ranking, this choosing is a necessary thing in the mess and scariness, even as we're biting our nails around all of it. Among those who wish to be ranked now are those who want to go back to a time of greatness, and others would have us question, who is that time of greatness really all that great for? It's not a partisan question to ask, what kind of greatness are we ranking? Will we choose to rank with the greatness in mind that is Jesus' way? This greatness. So what is this greatness that Jesus points us to? We, like those brothers, think in our anxiety that when we know the ranking, when we do the ranking, we'll have a better handle on what's coming. We'll be ready for it. This is a human thing to want some kind of grounding before whatever happens next is going to happen, before we're all plunged into the plunging. We're asking Jesus, give us our identity. Tell us who we might be. James and John, yes, they had come to the water. They were facing the abyss of crisis. They were faced with being plunged into the plunging. So when Jesus asks, well, will you join me in drinking the cup in being plunged into the deep end, they say, here's what they say. It's surprising. We are able. We have the power. But what kind of power? Now, we, righteously angry or just plain angry, many of us say the same thing. We have the power. We want to be great. We say that we're great. But saying we have the power for those on the margins, this can be a rightful claiming, a self-empowerment that demands what has been denied them. It can be a phrase a long time coming. But for those of us like me who are traditionally abled, cisgender white men, the claim we have the power is as dangerous as it is true. So if we relish power, Jesus warns us that we will become slaves of everything. We who have the power become trapped in a self-created web of subjugation. When we dare to crave power, we manipulate all to injure. This is what we do to maintain this power. The way of Jesus, though, and this is where it comes, where Jesus teaches us this answer to the question of how we are to be. The way of Jesus, though, is that of servanthood. And we have icons of this servanthood. They look like deacons. They are deacons. Deacons show us that making our own selves and America great again is about being humble servants. And servanthood is not about being subservient. Deacons kick tail and take names. They remind us that stewardship is the only way to greatness. Stewardship, a stewardship that surrenders to the plunging in the best way. Servants, deacons, show us by their lives that really to be Jesus followers, we have to give it all up to God because it all belongs to God, all returns to God, and we steward it in this middle time. So like me, I wonder, have you come to the water, thirsty and longing and wistful? We're not the same people that we once were. And because we wonder what has become of us after all that we've gone through, maybe some of you are thinking this today. Standing at the sea, looking out at the beautiful terror before you, the abyss. Maybe you realize that you have come, though, to the river. What if we have come to the Jordan River? And here it comes again to Jesus' words about being plunged. It comes back to being about baptism. So, in this moment of anxiety, when we have these moments of dread, of melancholy, of looking out in the abyss, we renew our baptismal vows. We will be the church. We will resist evil, proclaim the good news, love our neighbor, strive for justice and peace, and respect the dignity of all the living. Yes, we have come to the water at this time and this moment. Do we have the power to be plunged into the plunging done by and to ourselves? The answer, friends, I would offer is yes, because we who follow Christ know that we have already been baptized into water that is dangerous, but water that we can be saved from, not by our own faithfulness, no, but by the faithfulness of Jesus. The power is not ours, but it is Christ's. Christ says to us today that true power at the edge of the abyss doesn't come from where we think. It doesn't come from tyrants, but from the one who made himself the least, whose death and resurrection we have been plunged into. We have come to the water, and with Christ at our side, the vista of crisis before us is as lovely as it is broken and unknown. Christ gives us his power. Christ gives us this alien power to be servants, to be deacons. Amidst all anxiety, let the water of the abyss, the vista of the unknown, the roiling waves of melancholy crisis remind us of our baptism and what it calls us to as Christians. We've already been plunged into the water that saves us. Plunged into this water, we have given up being the first. We have become great. We have already become great through Jesus' greatness. We have the power.